Ledger code cracks the black van racket. A mechanic in Greyhaven refuses to sink under a loan shark. Stay, because the move he makes under a freight yard light turns fear into leverage. Reed Lawson kept the late shift at a small service bay near the river where old rails crossed cracked asphalt, and the night smelled like solvent and wet iron. The roll-up door rattled when a freight went by and fine grit fell from the track bed onto the hood of a sedan that could not hold idle without a hand on the throttle. He wiped his knuckles with a rag gone gray and watched the skin pull tight over the places where scars should have been, because luck had spared him cuts and given him aches instead. A radio 2 shops down bled out a ball game that few could afford to see live. And that thin sound mixed with the low hum of a vending machine that never kept anything cold. In the corner a stack of brake rotors leaned like a tired wall, and a mop bucket held water that reflected the tube light in a broken bar. He liked that empty hour after midnight when phone screens went dark, and only the work made sense. The problem waited outside in a black van with a sliding door that groaned even when new grease had been pressed into the rail. Victor Cade ran small credit in Greyhaven, quick cash against paychecks and titles, clean on paper and dirty in practice, and Reed owed him more than a month of wages after a hospital bill ate the savings he had kept for his niece. Naomi slept 2 bus stops away with a night lamp that painted the wall with a soft ring. And Reed carried that ring in his head when Cade sent 2 men to remind him what default meant in this city. They had met him at his own workbench, friendly on the surface, fingers testing the edge of a gasket scraper while they talked. They told him to keep the tow truck on call for late pickups along the docks, and to forget to write certain jobs on the log, and to hand off keys that sat in a tray by the register. He had nodded while his mind walked a grid of streets that could not be crossed without tickets or tolls, because rules bit harder when you were late on a bill. He saw how the game worked when he watched one of the men flip through a small ledger bound in cheap vinyl, not the kind a bank would respect but the kind that lived in glove boxes and back pockets. Plates, addresses, dates, amounts and small marks that did not mean much alone. Over time they built weight. Reed found a rhythm in the work that night, brakes off, calipers hung with wire, pads replaced, torque set by feel when the gun lied, and oil wiped clean so a leak would tell the truth later. A gnat circled the tube and left a smear when it landed on the glass. Outside, condensation tapped a slow beat on the metal roof, and a stray dog curled against a warm tire. He stood at the threshold and watched the black van idle under a broken street light while a man inside held the ledger up to count. The van had been around too often, and the crew drove it with the kind of care that meant something in it mattered more than they wanted to show. Reed thought about Naomi breathing under that lamp, and felt a simple line draw itself in his chest. He could pay Cade and bend his days until the debt was gone. He could tip the police and hope they cared about a ledger that looked like private notes. He could also learn what the notes hid and make them speak without ever raising his voice. That last idea settled like weight in a pocket where a key had lived for years. Reed reached for the shop phone, stared at the dark screen, and then set it back in its cradle without dialing. He took a slow walk to the back lot. The air over the river held a metallic taste that stuck to the tongue. A forklift sat under a tarp, forks low, battery on charge, and the tarp snapped once when a night breeze turned the corner by the dumpster. He used the forklift to lift a pallet that had not moved in months and found a narrow path behind the fence, a gap kids used to cut down to the tracks. If the van kept coming, if the ledger kept opening, there had to be a path from those notes to the cargo that fed them. Reed did not draw maps. He memorized routes by smell, and by the way light hit a wall. He knew the pattern of trains, the timing of guard rounds at the private depot by Basin Street, the hour when the reefer units shut down for service, and the yard fell quiet enough to hear a socket click. By 2 in the morning he had a plan that did not look brave. It looked patient. It looked like work he already knew how to do, only turned at a different angle. Greyhaven did not reward speeches. It noticed actions and filed them under noise until results made them visible. Reed started with the tow truck logs that Cade wanted him to leave blank. He wrote them clean and tight instead, with times that matched security cameras, and with notes about who signed for a release when a car left impound. Small details flowed into a notebook of his own that never left the shop. He watched which keys Cade tried to borrow, and which ones came back with a fresh tag from a different lot. He learned that a storage yard on Marlin Avenue always had space even when every other place had a waiting list. and that the clerk there smiled with the flat eyes of someone who owed the wrong person. Reed stayed late and took pickups along the waterfront where cranes stuck against a gray sky, and where salt dried on chrome and thorny maps. He noted the trailers Cade liked to shadow with his van. Some were loaded with box bikes, some with televisions that never made it to store shelves, some with pallets of small automotive parts that could disappear without anyone crying out on the news. He did not tail them close. He parked with a view across an access road, and he waited. Fog rose from drainage ditches and sat low across the pavement like a blanket that turned bright under sodium lamps. A switch engine clanked, a horn sounded at a crossing, and the dockers moved like a tide that knew the hours by muscle memory. In that cover Reed saw Cade work a pattern that made sense only if the ledger carried more than numbers. 2 times a week the van met a white box truck behind a warehouse with a bent sign. The drivers traded paperwork and one crate moved, only one. Big enough to be worth risk and small enough to be missed by no one but the right clerk. Reed noticed the crate had a number stamped into a steel band. He could not copy it from a distance, so he watched for it to reappear. It showed up 3 nights later when a reefer unit went offline for service. The rhythm of the yard stumbled, and Cade hurried a hand truck across a throat of concrete between trailers. Reed used the stumble. He rolled the tow truck out from a line of parked city vehicles, and set his amber beacons on steady to look official. Nobody argues with a tow when paperwork looks thin. He blocked the path, apologized to a yard boss with a tired smile, and backed up slow until Cade had to stop and shift the crate to the curb. That pause gave Reed the sight line he needed. 2 letters, 5 numbers, and a stencil from a freight forwarder he knew by reputation. Back at the bay he traced the number through online public filings and old invoices he had stacked from past work. The crate should have been bound for a parts distributor on the west side. It never arrived. Reed did not call the police yet. He called the insurance desk at the distributor and asked innocent questions about a claim for damage on a pallet that had never been delivered. The clerk on duty confirmed a supervisor had logged a loss reserve, but had not filed a report. That meant the distributor suspected theft and wanted leverage before a premium jump. Reed offered to bring photographs if the supervisor wanted them. Then he slept 3 hours and woke with a stiffness that came from more than work. He printed stills from the yard cameras that watched the public road near Basin Street. Images that showed the white box truck and the black van within minutes of each other on nights when that stencil number changed hands. He printed his own logs and signed them. He walked them to a modest brick building that housed a credit union on the first floor and 3 small offices above it, one of which belonged to a woman who handled property crime claims for the distributor. Her name was Serena Holt. She did not smile more than she had to, and she did not look impressed by a mechanic with a folder. She read fast and asked if he wanted the police or a quiet fix. Reed said he wanted out from under a debt, and he wanted a certain van to stop showing up where he worked. He said he had no wish to wear a wire or to testify if a safer path existed. Holt tapped the folder against her desk and said she could set a meeting with a detective who had time for cases that looked small but touched bigger ones. She did not promise anything past that. The next night Reed kept working. He stayed visible, and he let the van see him watching without flinching. Inside he felt the line in his chest hold. It held because the plan did not rely on heroics. It relied on details turning into pressure in the right hands. The meeting looked like nothing at first. Holt came by the bay with a man who wore plain clothes and the wary patience that long work in bland offices can teach. He said his name, and it carried no shine. He asked Reed to keep doing what he had been doing, and to give him time to line up warrants that did not look like a raid. Reed agreed and changed the brake light on a taxi while they spoke, because work did not stop for strategy. In the days that followed, the ledger kept opening under that broken street light, and Cade kept sending men who liked to lean in doorways with hands in jacket pockets. Reed did not give them a scene. He gave them a man who finished jobs and looked them in the eye. He added one thing they did not see. He hung a small camera inside the office that watched the tray where keys waited for pickup. It recorded hands and tags and the moments when a key left without a line in the book. He logged those moments and he matched them to missing items from insurance files that Holt shared in careful doses. Each match was another turn on a valve hidden in the wall. When it reached tight enough, the detective called. He said to leave the tow truck parked by the depot entrance, just before dawn on a day when a barrier would be checked by a city inspector. He said to be ready to move a car that was never there, a car that would become an excuse to stop a box truck for a minute under that same broken light. Reed did what the call asked. The hour came with a pale sky and a gull on the roof that watched like a sentry. The inspector walked slow with a clipboard and a fixed stare. The box truck rolled to the gate. Kate sat in the van behind it, face half lit by the glow from the dash. The tow truck eased forward, the beacons went on, and Reed stepped down with a strap over his shoulder and a calm that felt earned. He pointed to a puddle that marked a coolant leak near the wheel line, and he asked the driver to hold a moment for safety. It was not a lie. The leak existed. He had watched it form. While the driver waited, the detective walked up from the far side and asked for paperwork. The delay let a second car arrive, unmarked, with two more who knew the rhythm of questions that can look like casual conversation. Cade made a move to steer around. The inspector held his spot and wrote a note that made the gate stay closed. There was no shouting. There was only weight shifting in quiet steps as hands took photos of the crate band, and as the number that Reed had written down more than once appeared again in fresh paint. The ledger in the glove box turned into proof when a search found it with sheets that matched the prints Holt had saved. The van left on a flatbed and the box truck returned to the yard with its seal intact. A month later, the bay felt different. The radio still missed the score by a second, but the sound felt warmer. Reed had papers from the credit union that moved his debt into a plan with terms he could survive. Cade did not visit any longer. The men who had leaned in doorways found other corners to haunt. The detective stopped by once more with a card that Reed slid into a drawer and forgot, not out of pride but out of relief. Holt sent a short note that said the claim settled, and that the distributor had recognized his help with a small fee. It was enough to fix the forklift and to replace the tube light with a newer one that did not hum. Naomi slept with the same lamp, and Reed could stand in the hall without listening for every footstep on the stairs. On a clear night, he rolled the door up, and the river moved like a sheet of dark glass that caught the shape of the city without making promises. He tightened a belt, set a torque, and washed his hands in a sink that finally drained right. He had not become a hero. He had turned patience into leverage and fear into a list that could not be ignored. He kept the shop open past midnight, and he liked the quiet again. In the far corner, he set a jar with a label he wrote in neat print. The jar said Naomi School Trip Fund. The words meant ordinary life, which felt like the rarest prize in Grey Haven.